Have you ever looked at something totally new, like a real innovation, and just wondered, how did they even start thinking like that? How do you build something completely from scratch, not just tweak what's already there? Well, today we're doing a deep dive into exactly that, using Peter Thiel's really influential book, Zero to One, Notes on Startups, or How to Build the Future.
Mm.
Thiel basically says our whole idea of progress is often, well, a bit off. Most of what we call innovation is really one to N, like taking a plan and just building more or making things slightly better. But the real game-changing stuff, the progress that actually shifts industries, maybe even society, that's what he calls 0 to 1. It's like creating a blueprint that just didn't exist before, inventing something totally new. And look, this isn't just a manual for tech founders. It's more like a radical mindset. It forces you to question, well, pretty much everything you thought you knew about building anything, really, whether that's a huge company or just your next career step. Okay, so our mission here, for you listening, is to pull out the most important, sometimes kind of surprising ideas and insights from this book. It's a pretty contrarian view on innovation, right? We want to give you a shortcut, basically, to getting your head around this unique perspective on building the future. So yeah, let's get into it.
What's really interesting is how Thiel kicks things off. He asks this question, which is maybe the key question for anyone trying to innovate. What important truth do very few people agree with you on? And this is so central because, the book points out that many people just assume all the low-hanging fruit is gone, progress has to be incremental. But Thiel says no, there are secrets still out there, hidden in plain sight.
Secrets. That sounds, almost a bit mysterious. How does he actually suggest we go about finding them? Is it like a specific way of thinking, or do you need a certain kind of personality?
It's less mystical, more about pushing back against beliefs that are just deeply ingrained. Thiel isn't just saying be different for the sake of it. He's arguing the most valuable secrets are often uncomfortable truths. They're hidden not because they're super complex necessarily, but because they just go against the grain, So most people overlook them. He suggests looking in areas that aren't fully developed yet, maybe nutrition or even subjects people don't like talking about. And definitely where different fields intersect. Think about PayPal or Facebook. Both were built on ideas that most people thought were wrong or maybe impossible at the time. So by finding and acting on these unique truths, you really can create massive value, maybe even change the world.
Right. And speaking of challenging what everyone thinks, Thiel drops another pretty provocative line. All happy companies are different. Each one earns a monopoly by solving a unique problem. Now, monopoly that usually gets a bad rap, right? Like it stifles competition. How does Thiel manage to reframe that? Why does he see it as actually driving progress?
Yeah, it's a totally counterintuitive take, isn't it? But if you connect it back, the distinction he makes is really key. Thiel argues that in this world obsessed with competition, real innovation actually creates a kind of temporary monopoly. Not by squashing competitors, but by just offering something so much better that for a while competition isn't really relevant. You see, when companies just compete head to head, it often leads to commoditization. Everything starts looking the same, margins get thinner and thinner. But if a company solves a truly unique problem, it can capture significant value. And crucially, it can then reinvest that value into more groundbreaking work. He talks about 4 characteristics of this kind of beneficial monopoly. Proprietary technology, network effects, economies of scale, and strong branding. And the strategy, he says, start small. Dominate a really specific niche first, then expand carefully into adjacent markets, but avoid getting dragged into competition just for the sake of competing.
So it's really about designing your business to be fundamentally different from the start, not just, a slightly better version of what exists. And this connects directly to his idea about definite optimism in planning. He says, a definite view, by contrast, favors firm convictions. Instead of pursuing many-sided mediocrity and calling it well-roundedness, a definite person determines the one best thing to do and then does it.
Exactly. This whole concept is about atopically shaping the future, not just passively waiting for it to happen. Definite optimism means you have actual concrete visions. You make long-term plans, and you're willing to take calculated risks to make those visions real. It's the kind of thinking that, built the Apollo program or the Golden Gate Bridge. These huge, ambitious projects didn't just pop up. They were meticulously planned and executed with, unwavering belief.
That definite optimism, it sounds incredibly powerful, almost like a superpower. But let's be real, for a lot of us, life feels much more indefinite, right? Full of change, unknowns. How does Thiel's idea here account for flexibility? What happens when that definite plan hits a snag, which it inevitably will?
That's a really good point, and I think that's where the quality of the definite plan matters. It's not about blindly sticking to a script no matter what. It's about having a clear, well-thought-out vision and the conviction to see it through. The flexibility comes in how you adapt within that big picture. You make informed adjustments based on new data, rather than just throwing the whole thing out the window at the first sign of trouble. It does make you think, doesn't it? How can you, listening right now, apply this kind of definite optimism to your own goals, your own projects? How do you move beyond just reacting?
Yeah, that's a tough one to chew on. And within that planning, there's also this strong emphasis on specialization. He really highlights mastering one thing, saying every individual should be sharply distinguished by her work. Okay. And it's not just for people in a company, but for the company itself, too.
Right. And this approach, it has some pretty clear benefits. It cuts down on internal competition, for one. It boosts efficiency. And it allows for much deeper expertise. And that deep expertise, that's often where real innovation comes from. Think about PayPal again. He mentions how each early employee was responsible for basically one key metric, that's it. Or Amazon. They started laser focus only on books before they even thought about expanding. It really hammers home the power of deep focus in whatever you're doing. What happens when you truly master one thing instead of spreading yourself too thin across many?
Okay, this next insight from Thiel. Honestly, it totally flipped how I thought about venture capital.
Yeah.
He says, and this is pretty startling, the biggest secret in venture capital is that the best investment in a successful fund equals or outperforms the entire rest of the fund combined. The power law.
That's it exactly, the power law distribution. It basically means that in VC, and arguably in business generally, a tiny, tiny number of outliers drive almost all the success. And that has huge implications for how you should think about using resources. If you're an investor, it suggests you should concentrate your bets on the few opportunities you think have massive potential, because diversifying too broadly might mean you miss the really big winners. If you're an entrepreneur, well, it means you need to aim ridiculously high. You need to try and create a category-defining company, not just one that's incrementally better, because the rewards are so skewed towards those massive successes. And even for individuals, it suggests focusing on developing skills that are rare and genuinely valuable, because those are the ones that tend to command exponential returns, not just linear ones. It helps us understand why aiming for that huge exponential improvement, not just small incremental gains, is just so critical.
So it's not about placing lots of good bets. It's about finding that one incredible bet that could change everything. And to make that bet viable, you need something genuinely defensible. Thiel says the best advantage is proprietary technology because it makes your product difficult or impossible to replicate. And this leads to the 10x improvement rule.
Yeah, the 10x idea is fascinating. It explains why just being a bit better often isn't enough. You need to be something like 10 times better than the existing solutions to overcome people's inertia, to get them to switch from what they already know and use. How do you get there? Well, maybe by inventing something totally new, or by radically improving something that exists, or sometimes by creating a much superior integrated design. Think about Google's original search algorithms, or PayPal's first online payment system, or, yeah, the iPhone. They weren't just slightly better, they felt like a quantum leap, orders of magnitude better.
That really is the million-dollar question, though, isn't it? Because 10x better isn't just a small step. It's a huge leap. In your view, what's the biggest mental block for founders trying to think 10x instead of just, say, 2x? And what jumps out at you in your own field, maybe, that feels like it could be 10x better?
That's a tough one. I think often the biggest hurdle is simply having the audacity, the courage to think that big. And maybe believing it's even possible. Our brains are kind of wired for incremental steps, right? So breaking that pattern takes real, deliberate effort and conviction.
Right. And then, okay, say you have built that 10x better product. There's this common blind spot, especially maybe for engineers or inventors, forgetting how you actually get it to people. Thiel is really blunt about this. He says, if you've invented something new, but you haven't invented an effective way to sell it, you have a bad business no matter how good the product.
That's exactly right. A brilliant product is basically useless if nobody buys it or uses it. It's like, yeah, building an amazing car and just leaving it parked in the garage forever. The book outlines different ways to handle distribution. Things like complex sales, which maybe SpaceX uses for rockets, personal sales, maybe for something like box selling to businesses. Then there's broader marketing and advertising, like Warby Parker selling glasses, or even viral marketing, which was absolutely key for PayPal early on. The main point, the really critical takeaway, is that you have to pick the right strategy for your specific product. And even more importantly, you need to be thinking about distribution from day one. It should be built into how you design the product itself.
It can't be an afterthought. It has to be part of the core plan. It definitely makes you think about any idea you might have, how would you actually get it out there to the people who need it? And speaking of people, Thiel puts huge emphasis on the human side, especially the founding team and the company culture. He uses PayPal again as an example. He says, PayPal's office amenities never got much press, but the team has done extraordinarily well. The culture was strong enough to transcend the original company.
That's such a critical insight. A strong founding team, they're united by a shared mission, they have skills that complement each other. And this often leads to that phenomenon people call the startup mafia. This powerful network that forms when key people from a really successful startup go on to create or invest in other big things, leveraging that shared history and trust. Thiel's advice is don't get caught up in superficial perks like fancy offices or free snacks. Instead, focus on building a genuine culture of excellence and shared purpose. That's what attracts the right kind of dedicated people and helps the company push through the inevitable hard times. So for you listening, how do you build that kind of strong team dynamic in whatever groups you're part of?
This brings us back to something we touched on earlier,
Yeah.
how much sales gets underestimated.
Yeah.
I have to admit, maybe valuing efficiency, I've sometimes thought of sales as, I don't know, a necessary evil, almost like an interruption to the real work. Thiel's basically shouting that that's a massive blind spot. What's the biggest mental shift maybe we or the listeners need to make to really see distribution as essential?
Yeah, Thiel really hammers that bias home. He clarifies that sales skills are actually valuable everywhere in all kinds of professions, and often the very best salesmanship is kind of invisible because it just feels natural, like it's part of the conversation. It's not about tricking anyone. It's about clearly showing the value in how you're solving a real problem for them. And this point is definitely worth repeating. Distribution has to be integral to product design, not separate. Entrepreneurs, innovators, they need to embrace selling, develop those skills right alongside their technical chops. It's about a holistic approach to actually building something successful. It challenges your own biases about what sales even means, right?
Absolutely. It really does. Now, to avoid some major pitfalls, Thiel uses the clean tech bubble from the 2000s as this big cautionary tale. He warns clean tech companies failed because they neglected one or more of the 7 questions that every business must answer.
Yeah, exactly. Those companies, a lot of them, were chasing a popular trend, maybe government subsidies, without having solid business fundamentals underneath. So Thiel lays out these 7 critical questions, and they act as a really robust checklist, really, for evaluating any potential venture. You listening could use them too. They are 1, engineering. Can you actually create breakthrough technology, not just incremental improvement? 2, timing. Is now the right moment to start this particular business? 3, monopoly. Are you starting with a big share of a small, well-defined market? 4, people. Do you have the right team on board, the right skills, the right chemistry? 5, distribution. Do you have a concrete way to deliver your product to customers effectively? 6, durability. Will your market position be defensible over the next 10, 20 years? And 7, secret. Have you identified a unique opportunity, that contrarian truth that others are missing? He argues that by consciously thinking through and answering these questions, you stand a much better chance of building something lasting, something successful, and avoiding those traps of just chasing hype.
Okay, finally, let's touch on the role of founders themselves. Thiel talks about this founder's paradox. He says, founders are important not because they are the only ones whose work has value, but rather because a great founder can bring out the best work from everybody at his company.
Right. And what's really fascinating there is his observation that successful founders often embody these extreme, sometimes contradictory traits. They might be insiders and outsiders at the same time. Visionaries, but also intensely pragmatic. And this paradox, he suggests, isn't a weakness. It's actually a source of strength. It allows them to see opportunities others miss, to bridge different worlds, and to really inspire their teams to do extraordinary things. I think the takeaway from this deep dive is that you, the listener, should think about recognizing and cultivating your own unique qualities, your own distinct vision, because those things, they really can lead to exceptional results, whether you're building a huge company or just navigating your own career path.
So what does all this boil down to for you? Our deep dive into 0 to 1. It's really not just about how to build a startup, is it? It's fundamentally about a different way of thinking. It's about creating genuinely new value, going from 0 to 1 instead of just fighting for scraps in an existing market, going from 1 to N.
Yeah, the core message seems pretty clear. Real progress, the kind that creates significant, lasting value, tends to come from thinking boldly, thinking differently, that contrarian approach. It comes from definite, long-term planning and having this relentless focus on creating something fundamentally new, something hopefully 10 times better than what already exists. So given all these insights, maybe we can leave you with one final thought to mull over. Thinking about Thiel's challenge to conventional wisdom. What secret, what important truth that few agree on might be hiding in plain sight right now in your world, in your field? What opportunity is just waiting for you to discover it and maybe, just maybe, turn it into something genuinely new, something 0 to 1?